Server meshing test D has happened. Now, on one hand, this was pretty broken, lots and lots of 30Ks, but actually when you look at how much progress CRG have made in less than a month, it's actually pretty impressive. And I think we had the first proof in this test that starters can actually handle player counts of 1,000 and upwards. And it does actually sound as though CRG are aiming for even higher than that. We started off as we have been with the 100 player test, but then quickly actually moved on to 1,000 player tests with 6 DGSs. Now, interaction delay, as you can see here, is working pretty well. There's not much of a delay once you press a button or click to do something. It's working pretty quickly. Also keep an eye on the ping. Now, there was just a quick spike there up to 1,000, but in previous tests, the ping has been really all over the place, up in the thousands consistently. And actually, here things are working much better. Also, keep an eye on the movement of the other players that I can see. The amount of desync, or in previous tests, we've had it where the players just weren't moving whatsoever. But again, keep an eye on their heads as they're turning there. And things aren't perfect, but things are significantly better than we've seen in previous 1,000 player tests. Now, keep an eye on this server FPS here. You'll notice that as we all faff around in the elevators, there's not enough space in the elevators. I did die at 1.21, but keep an eye on as people are coming in and out. There was a significant issue with the 1,000 player test, and it was basically this. The server FPS now has locked to 11.7. You can see people doing sort of idle animations there, but effectively what's happened is that it's gone. And CRG later said that it's a hybrid crash that's causing this, and this was repeatedly happening. So there are definite signs of things working here, but we had some serious issues, and it seemed to be down to this one crash. Now, as you see, I got killed in an elevator here, and we went to hospital, but this gave us a good opportunity to look at interaction delay for terminals. Again, remember, this is 1,000 players, 6 DGSs. So to be moving at this sort of speed, where things are this responsive, again, I'll show you in a moment, is a significant step up compared to where we were a few weeks ago. The trains were deadly when we were in Test B. I did a lot of testing in Test B, but again, the transit system is undertaking a rework, and so we're hoping for things that you're seeing. It might be fixed at some stage. There's obviously some wonkiness happening all over the place with the trains, but we were actually able to get out the train, which we couldn't a few weeks ago necessarily that easily. And again, look at this, the player movement here. I've seen it be worse than this on live servers with 100 players, and you'll see in a moment that doesn't continue, but these are signs that they actually are going to get this working at 1,000 players and upwards. You can see here the server FPS is stalled, everybody stops. In this case, it does actually recover in a second. See the server FPS is moving again, and you'll see in a moment there's people moving up in front of you. So it's definitely not perfect. This does end as all the 1,000 player tests did with a 30K, but we are making significant progress. These are the Test B tests from the early part of September, and you'll see here this was 3 DGSs, 500 players. The players are not moving, they don't update, and you can see here how much progress has been made. The amount of desync was absolutely huge, and players were just static. And again, when we got to 1,000 players in that Test B, you can see the amount of interaction delay we had here. I've pressed to get out of bed and just nothing is happening. And at the point that I do get out of bed, I can only get as far as the elevator before the whole thing crashes, and that was as good as it got. And many people had much worse experience, just weren't able to get in at all in Test B. So things like this, again, there is some skating of the players, there is desync, but considering what we're seeing here compared to what we had a few weeks ago, and things are not perfect, they're not working in that there's continual hybrid crashes, as we'll go on to talk about in a second, but they have made significant progress in terms of actually getting this working. And you see here, they were analysing crashes to see what was going on, and it was the same hybrid crash over and over again on the servers. So they're looking at it. Benoit basically is saying, so far, much better overall performance, but we're assessing to see if we need to downscale because of the crash that kept happening. So that's what happened, and eventually they went to a 4-500 setup. This crash has too many reproductions to make it useful to go higher, so we'll cancel going to higher numbers for tonight. So again, they were intending to go to higher. And Wintermute here says that we already know what we need to do to address the crash here, and then the servers will back up for 4-500. it worked again fairly well compared again to that test B that we saw where the players just didn't move. They updated every now and again. Look at the movement here. It's relatively smooth. Again, I've seen it much worse than this on live servers. And so to be testing with these sorts of numbers, I think is progress. The server FPS throughout this whole test on all of the different combinations actually isn't great. And as we see in a minute when we get up to space, it gets significantly worse. But again, we're on a train. People are still moving. It's still being updated over the network to my client. So that is massive progress compared to a few weeks ago. In space as well, ship, I thought, let's see, again, relatively smooth. But desync has been a significant issue in this game for a long while, but will this sort of changes that they're making actually fix some of that problem? Here you can see the transition between servers. They've changed slightly the naming, it seems, so we've now got numbers which allow us to see when you've swapped servers. You can see going from 65 in space to 34 for Magda. These were still crashing. In my experience, these 500 player servers, I had a couple of goes and they still were crashing, but you just got longer. And so you can still switch between a few servers. So I've gone from 65 to 23 here for Aberdeen, but I wasn't able to map out the whole system this time. And eventually we got this from Benoit. Okay guys, we'll leave the test preview up for 500 until the morning. A lot of great data. We confirmed our optimization worked and saw great performance at 1K, but unfortunately have another crash to chase higher numbers. We'll prepare another build with fixes, optimizations, and have another go once it's cooked. You could look at this, and again, I was checking out a few different streams, and there were some people saying this isn't great progress, and there's people saying, oh, this is great progress. It's both of those things in some ways. From a player point of view, this was very crashy. 1,000 players, it was very crashy. But for those few minutes where it wasn't crashing, it was a picture of what CIG are aiming for, and it was the first time they've really got 1,000 players working for any period of time at really any sort of reasonable way. Interaction delay at 1,000 players seemed to be basically non-existent. So again, all the work that they've done, they've gone away, they've tested, they've done optimizations. It's taken 2 weeks really to get this test out. It took a bit longer. And they talked in Benoit's kind of report about rapid iteration, and that's what we're having. We're having them take the results of this test, take the data they get, and then go and fix it. And I was on a podcast with Space Tomato a few days ago, and at that point, it was looking like, oh, how long is this testing going to take? Are they going to be doing rapid iteration for weeks and weeks and weeks? Is this actually not going to be that rapid? But seeing what they've pulled off in this test, in Test D, where actually, although it didn't work that well, underlying stuff, the stuff that they've been working on, was working pretty well. And if you're optimistic, you might look at this and think, well, maybe in the next test or the test after that, they might actually get 1,000 players working fairly well, looking at the progress they've made up until this point. If you're pessimistic, you might say, well, this crash, the hybrid crash that's happened, maybe that will uncover all sorts of other issues and they'll have to go down a rabbit hole of fixing all those. There's no point really guessing, only time will tell. But even though it was very broken, even though there was a lot of 30Ks, I think this is a very positive sign that CIG are actually on the verge of pulling off server meshing.